Toughest Show. I am so excited to welcome back Pat Black-Gould. Pat, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Oh, Jen, thank you so much. It's just an honor to be here. I'm glad to be a part of this.
I am so glad you are, and I would love for you to bring us up to date with what have you been up to since we last chatted? Because when we last chatted, we were talking about the description and the way of bringing things to life within a children's book. And in particular, you had something that was based in real life. So bring me up to date. What have you been up to?
Crystal beads actually, it grew in a number of different ways, but one of the things I had the fortune of doing was really traveling around the country and bringing the book to both children and adults, various different organizations, churches, synagogues, schools. And on top of that, we also have a choreographer, a musician, and a collage artist that we've actually done various different conferences and presentations. We've incorporated different forms of art that we've taken and performed with the book as well. So that has been really nice. And there was a song written specifically for the crystal beads, and another artist, another musician had some music that she had that fit it. And we have a beautiful choreographer who just danced to various sections of the book.
Oh, I love all of that so much because that's just such a neat way to show different extensions that you can create from a book. Sometimes it could be a companion journal, sometimes it can be a workshop or a workbook or a presentation. But I love that you had a song created from it too. That's so cool.
Yeah, we brought it to life in every way that we could, which further just gives that the important messages of the book and puts it out there even stronger. So we were very fortunate to have a nice group that let us all put that together.
I think that is so cool. And so the first book, this children's book, it's in a period. So it's set in World War II, but it is also based upon a true story for someone. And I love that you did that because there's a kind of a natural extension into your next book, which is more women's fiction, more like adult fiction. So I love that you kind of have this thread going on with your writing. What made you want to focus in on like a period piece, a historical fiction piece, and bringing it to life like that?
For the new book, yeah, I'm not really even sure. I started writing stories about kids in school, kids in a Catholic grammar school, and their kind of adventures and misadventures. And I just was creating the world of the 1950s where I grew up. So it's a kind of autobiographical in many ways, and decided to just bring these kids to life and see their lives. What is it like growing up at the age they grew up in, when we had so much going on in the country, which is similar to now. So I use my family as the models for it in many ways, and my school and everything that I'd gone through during the time, and just really created the story to bring the kids from kindergarten, first grade, I think, all the way to actually when they're in their 30s. And specifically Kate and her cousin Albie, who she was a hippie against the war. He was gung-ho GI Joe and couldn't wait to enlist.
Wow. So what was it like doing the research to create this new book? I mean, I know you had to do research with your children's book as well. So how did you draw on similar techniques, and where were things a little different?
Yeah, it was a lot. Even though I've lived it, you can live it, but you might not know and pick up all the details of what happened. Oh, yeah, I remember this, I remember that, but did that match? Did that song really match that year? Sometimes there'd be a song that would be perfect that I wanted to talk about, but it was like the next year. So we couldn't do that. And I have a co-writer, my co-author, Steve Hardiman. We did this together, and he was fantastic for doing the research. It was even down to there's a peace demonstration in Central Park in New York I think it was 1968. We got to the point of checking the weather and the temperature for that particular year, that particular time, that particular event, to be that accurate. So the research just went all over the place, because we talk about the women's revolution, the women's movement, gay liberation at that time, politics. We include movies, we include just the culture, the dress, the clothes. We created sort of Jersey City and New York City, at that era, exactly what everything looked like, what it felt like.
But all of that's so important, not just to show this is historical fiction or this is the period that we're in, but what
Mhm.
it's doing is it's grounding the reader into this is where we are. So when they are reading the story, they're seeing the different things and they're feeling the space so that yes, they understand
Exactly,
the genre
exactly.
that they've picked up, but they're also trying
Yep.
to, they'll see the settings too. So I love that you put that kind of specificity. What are some other techniques that you did to, or things
See,
that showed up in the book?
yeah, and one of them that was really hard to do, but it was important for us to recreate was the draft scene lottery in 1969 when we had the draft lottery basically take place, where men at 19 would chosen whether they were going to be shipped to Vietnam or not. So they chose it by birth date that was just picked, out of this big canister. Your name was picked and you were first, maybe 185 or so, you were going to Nam. There was nothing about it. So the broadcast is on television. So Steve and I plowed through that broadcast over and over and tried to put the readers in their living rooms watching that TV show exactly at that time. And I have a guy that was about 30 years old in one of my writing groups, and he says, "Oh my God, it's like you just brought it to life." And I had no idea. I had no idea that actually happened, you know. So the
I
idea was to try to make it as vivid. My background's theater, so I'm always visual. So everybody, that reads it kind of says, "Oh, it's like a movie being played, or it's like a play being played." So you can really set it. What's that environment like? Even to the point at the beginning of that scene, Mayberry RFD, a popular show that was on at that time, we put in what they said on TV. It will be preempted to bring you Mayberry RFD will be postponed in order for us to do the draft lottery. So
yes.
down to the point of this is what they took off TV, and you got quite a thing to go from Mayberry RSD to the Vietnam War, So I just found that so fascinating. We had to put that in there.
But that's true because I mean now you can just change the channel if you needed
Yeah.
to. You couldn't just you had, but at that time you would have had to physically get up, turn the knob, and there were only so many channels to choose from. It wasn't like you
Mhm.
had cable to sit there and go, well, I'll just
Yeah.
go to a station that's not airing this. No, all of them were getting preempted, and that's it. That's what's happening here.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
but I love that you brought that to life for the characters. So, and obviously for your readers too.
Yeah.
So, when you were doing that kind of research, how did you know when that you've done a little too much research and you need to throttle it back just a little bit to keep things moving? Because sometimes you can just keep going and you want to add so much, but that can slow the book down. And but in the same breath, you want to add just the right amount at the right times because
Hmm.
sometimes you need it to be, you want a certain scene or you want a certain part to be slow, like to your point about the draft, adding all of that and slowing it down a little bit would increase the tension because now you don't know what's going to happen and you can kind of like play with the tempo within it between the sentence structure and what's happening. But
Hmm.
how did you know the balancing act between how much to include and when to throttle back?
Very difficult because obviously we gathered a lot more than we had to use. We had to throw out some of those instances, and they were very powerful, but we couldn't get them all in. So I might have, for instance, it was the Stonewall uprising in New York City right at that time. I would have liked to included more about that, but I couldn't. So I have one of the characters in there just give a little description of it as opposed to like place that particular incident there.
Yeah.
That was really important for us to be able to figure out, okay, somebody might say it in passing. An interesting thing that we did do with that, which I found fascinating, and it was sheer accident. I have one woman who is a nurse who is married to a Vietnam vet, and there's a lot about Vietnam vets in here. My passion was working with the Vietnam vets. And I put her working at a hospital, St. Vincent's in the Village, because that was my hangout area where I went to acting school, where I pretty much hung out in Greenwich Village. And so I put her working in St. Vincent's. When the book ends, we actually do a scene that's in 1980s at the beginning of the AIDS epidemic.
Mm.
And in my research about St. Vincent's, I actually found out that they were the epicenter for everything that was going on in the research for AIDS at that time. And I did not know that. So it was an accidental finding that after I had her there and placed and working there, we all of a sudden are into something that was served as such a valuable and important time frame, reference to fit that. And it was like, whoa. So things would happen accidentally as well as our researching or looking for something. I was stunned, and it was perfect. It couldn't have been better. Couldn't have been better.
I love that you said that, though, that sometimes you would just stumble into something and go, I have to use this. Sometimes that happens where you realize you have found a gem and you might not have been planning to weave something in, but now you want to work something around it just because it was just so, that it will add value. And I love that you were giving yourself the grace and the permission to do that, because sometimes it would have been easier in some cases to say, oh, that's great, but it's a little too much. That's awesome information. Maybe another book, or maybe a different thing, but no, you found a way. I like that, because you were finding a way to weave in the right pieces, pull out what wasn't. It's not that it's not important. It's just figuring out what's going to add the value to create the impact that you want within the story. And I love that you were navigating that. So you mentioned you were working with a co-author.
Yeah.
Talk to me about what that process was like, because every co-authorship relationship is a little different to create the book, and especially when you're writing fiction. So what was that like?
Oh boy. Yeah, it's not easy. It's not an easy process, but Steve and I met in a writing group, and he really liked the book, and when I was writing it alone individually, I had the kids, Catherine and Albie, as young kids, and I was going to bring them through 8th grade, and then I was going to just sort of do a chapter that brought them to the present and what their story looked like. But I sat down with Steve because I was going to enter this contest for like a first chapter contest. And I just said, well, you've seen so much of this. Help me write the blurb. And we started talking. And then I realized there is a whole adult section of the book. The kids do not just stop at 8th grade. So the kids actually go up until their 30s. And that developed out of the two of us talking. So I pulled him into the project, and I'll have to say, some of the people in the writing group is like, wait a minute, you've written, at that point I had like 80,000 words, which I got rid of a number of that, but slowly, somehow, the other people were just sort of saying, you're never going to be able to match your writing style. You're different in how you work. He was so good he didn't know anything about my environment. He wasn't from the same area in Jersey. He didn't know anything about it, but grasped it enough to the point where our writing, we can't remember who might have written what part. It's like, did you do that? No, I did that. Did you? And so he was able to delve into this whole thing and really be there, and so it pulled the characters out even further, and he's got an incredible sense of humor. And I come from a kind of a humor background with writing comedic, like murder mysteries and everything, but he would touch up and play it even more so that we can create a scene, going well. It's not easy, because it takes a longer time, because you're processing everything through two people instead of just one. It's not that we didn't have our disagreements, boy, we definitely did. But I think the process brought a much more solid book, a more researched book too, because I'm a big researcher, that allowed us to really collaborate and see eye to eye on this, which is not an easy task at all.
But okay, so many things are coming up for me hearing this. I love this so much, because, and the first thing I want to point out or mention is that I love the fact that, yes, you had a solid first draft. You had 80K. That's a lot of writing. That's a lot of time.
Yep.
That's a book. And you were willing to say, hey, wait, I think that it needs something else. It's not just that it might need, it's going to need editing at some point, but that's not what it needs right now. It needs something else. And you were willing to say, okay, what do I need to do? Because it's about this book. It's not about me. So first off, way to go for doing that, because I think that could be a challenge for others, and you did it. So how did you make that decision, in case somebody is listening who has written a good portion of their book or all of that manuscript, the first or second pass of it, and they are realizing that they know they want more, but they're having a hard time making that shift? What would you say to them?
Yeah. The storyline, the plot changed when I decided that we needed these adult characters' lives to be told. We needed to move them so that there are some fun sections because it was all kid stuff. There were some fun sections in the book and some fascinating characters that I said, this is good. This is good material. but so I probably cut that down, 50,000, maybe even less than that. But it's not serving the new way that we want the book to go through. The stages of the adult scenes are more important, even though it was crazy. The writing group, people that love the kids scenes, I'm like, I know they're good, but we have to move the storyline, and the storyline doesn't stop now at 8th grade. It goes into the 70s with one little chapter in the 80s. And as great as this is, can I just still get the kids in, but what are the important scenes that we have to have to further the plot along and the development and storylines? And sometimes you are throwing away some of the best stuff you feel like you've written, and it's like, okay, it's there, it's on the side, those characters still exist somewhere. Yes. It just didn't make it to this.
Yes, yes. And I think the other thing to bear in mind, especially with this story, is that the love that people were feeling, that your writers groups, to your point, were feeling for the children actually is so important, because this is important to show their relationship and create the attachment to the characters. So then as they're moving through all the other changes that the rest of the book presents to them, and you see the development of these characters individually and to each other and how they're perceiving things around them, now it feels different because you have invested the reader is like, oh, but I love these kids. Where are we going to go? I see so much in this, or I see, myself, or I see my child, or I see someone else in this. Mm-hmm. And then as they're reading, they become very invested into it. So those are pivotal chapters. Those are necessary chapters to create the strength and the attachment. So I love that you had that. And I love that you got such great feedback. But the fact that you were also willing to say, but I have words down at the other end. Mm-hmm. I have another 20K potentially at the other end of the book that maybe need to be shifted. You were willing to do that.
Yeah, and the main characters played along. They went. So the ones that became the ones that were needed really stayed through adulthood. So those characters are not dropped. You see their evolution. So it's not just the evolution of, one or two of them. And I'm a psychologist too. And part of writing this, it's transformative. Things happen to people in the story. Hard things happen to people. Some do well. Some find a way to pull themselves out of it, to just sort of continue and move. Some get stuck. So the whole psychological, component of what happens when trauma or something hits, and how do I move past it? Do I move past it? Does it change me? Does it do something to me? Yeah. And that plays out. So I would have to get the psychological arc for each of this character. If this happens, is this one going to do okay? How is he or she going to come out of it? One girl gets polio. It's 1950s. Mm-hmm. Polio is around. And Kate's furious. Catherine becomes Kate as she gets older, and she's furious with the fact that her friend got polio and everything. And the friend was basically, yeah, but I'm alive. I'm okay, and I'm still going, and I'm working hard and I'm healing, and so we just see that resilience that pulls through. Kate kind of she thinks she's got her act together. She doesn't always. And she gets stuck at points. Even though she doesn't like the black and white world of religion she learned in school, she's the one who gets stuck. And some of these other characters kind of intercept and move in and let her see how she gets stuck there when somebody else moves forward,
But see, okay, so here are some things that I'm picking up from all of this. And that is that, first off, everyone's backgrounds, when you're a writer and you playing off of all of your life experiences, whatever they are, whether or not it's because you've listened to a conversation like this one, or maybe it's because your career path presented itself a little differently and writing was always there as a part of it, but you had other things you were also doing, and your own life experiences, the things that you personally went through growing up or in any part of your life, or something that you saw, and how can it affect, or what can you do with it? All of those things shape. And it's, yes, I think we all know that, but sometimes I think that we can, as writers, forget that the power of all of those things, and the fact that we're choosing to tell a story, whether it's through a character or through a nonfiction piece or what have you, but all of those pieces come into play to help you create your unique voice and your unique story, that is why your voice is so important in there. And so what I hear you describing with your own process is that, yes, it was co-authored. Yes, there was a blending so that it didn't feel like two separate authors writing in this one
Mhm.
book. There needed to be a, a cohesiveness amongst in the story itself. But yet you stayed true to you, bringing through all the things that you've experienced, your background,
Mhm.
your love to tell this story. Your co-author did the same thing, but yet you found a way to create harmony with that.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
I love that so much. So when you and Steve decided, okay, we've gotten this as far as we can, how did you both know that you were ready to move on to a phase of editing, for instance? How did
Mm.
you know? Because you're both coming at it from different perspectives. So
Mhm.
how'd you know?
Mhm. Yeah, I felt we took the story and did an arc on all of the, and there was a lot of characters, family members, the parents, everything. It went to where it had to go, and that Kate, all the stumbling blocks that she had faced, she moved through them to get to where she needed to get to. I'll just say there's a lot of tragedy that ended up happening, as well as like a lot of funny stuff, but a lot of tragedy that I knew that the story needed to close at a point where I could make that transition for her, what she needed to have as the main character and how her family fit into that. My co-author is a lot more OCD than me, so it would be like, we can still, it's like, we have to draw the line. The character arcs, all right, psychologically for this age, for what she's just happened, this is where she's at. This is where a mother is at. This is where this one is at, you know? So it's that process of just understanding that if you take it anymore, it's at the point of diminishing returns. You're not going to get any more, you know? This is where she needs to be, and to place her in the right environment at the end of the book. And the end ties into the beginning, because the beginning starts with, my dad got shot in the Bible, which is during World War II. So we actually bring the research back to World War II. And that Bible, that book, I won't say where or how, is in that last chapter, you know. So everything comes around. Everything comes around. There are two important items at the beginning: a guardian angel, that every time Kate gets mad, she throws it against a wall and the wing breaks and she has to glue the wing back. And Albie has, or her mother glues it back, or she glues it back because she was too young. And an army soldier, a little green army soldier that Albie would carry everywhere, you know. There's themes of how those two are connected throughout the book, and they make it all the way through to the end, you know.
But
And
that's great because,
Vietnam War. Yeah.
but to your point, those are pieces that were introduced at the beginning, and
Yep.
it brings a full circle effect, just like the characters created that going to the arc like you were describing. And I love how you put that, where there was an element of diminishing returns. You were identifying there could be a point of diminishing returns. This is where we need to end this book. That doesn't
Mm-hmm.
mean there can't be something later, but right
Yeah.
now, for this book, it's right here.
Yeah.
So I love that you both were able to get to be on the same page and to do that. And when you're working together like that, I think that that's beautiful. Do you have any tips for people who might want to be co-authoring, or maybe they are in a co-authorship and would just maybe there's ways that they can improve upon what they've got?
Yeah, decide to in the co-authoring, pretty much, because it was pretty much my story. Steve joined me in it and bought in to, you know, my story, which would be different if the two of us were starting from scratch. Maybe it could have looked very differently if we both had something we were working on. So you have to sort of decide: is this something it's somebody's idea and the other person's kind of joining in on, and who gets the final say in how and you know, and when and why? Because we would talk about that a lot. Or, you know, can you merge your voices? Can you have that same thing, that it doesn't look like this is written by this person, that's written by that person? You know, like your work with the co-authoring work, you know, it's beautifully done. You know,
Thank you.
it works. And so in different genres, it's very different.
Mhm.
Nonfiction might be very different than something like the historical fiction. But you've got to really see if you can do it and stick with it. And you may plow through the arguments and you may get upset with each other, but you basically want to be able to both produce a really solid work. And if you can stay with that and just put the other stuff, okay, aside and work through it. Not often easy, but hopefully very, very productive and worthwhile.
Yeah, definitely. Pat, where can people connect with you? Where can they get your books? Where can they be part of your world?
You can reach me at patblackgould.com, my website. I'm also on Instagram under my name and also on Facebook. And the book we're looking at later on in the fall, and I will keep people updated on my website, but my email is also patblackgould@patblackgould.com. And to learn more, and like I said, the website will be out there, and there'll also be a Facebook page about the book that people can come in and join me to learn more about it as well.
Awesome, Pat. Thank you so much for being on the show. I so appreciate you.
Thank you so much, and it was really a pleasure. I really had fun doing this.